Hello, and welcome to The Back Room. I'm Lisa Schiffren, a Republican speechwriter.
And I'm David Eisenbach, presidential historian.
The Back Room is your show for behind-the-scenes political conversation about what's going on across the Bronx, across New York, and across this great country. Tonight's show is going to be about the recent presidential election.
So, Lisa, what did you think?
I was shocked that they didn't cheat. I expected Donald Trump to win the actual vote and to not be granted the right to be president.
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of the results, were you surprised that he did so well?
I was a little surprised. It makes sense to me because, of course, he was right on the issues. And the issues ought to matter more than the vibes. But so I guess I was not entirely surprised that he got the support of the people, only that he was allowed to get it.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that was surprising to me was how well he did with black men and Latinos. I knew he had the anti-war vote, but the three of those really came and pushed him over the top in terms of the popular vote.
Well, especially Latinos. He got almost 50% of the Latino vote across the country.
Yeah. And the Democrats really have a lot of soul searching to do because, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the migrant issue has definitely hurt them, and my hope is that Trump addresses it in a way that actually takes care of the issue of gangs rather than going after families with deportations.
Well, I think he's probably going to have to do a little of both because we've got so many people. There are 200,000 people in New York City living in shelters, using public resources, using schools, living on food stamps that they're being given, living on credit cards that they're being given, living in hotels where it's $400 or $500 a night. It's reasonable that taxpayers don't want to support this.
It's definitely unsustainable for New York City. This is
not just New York City. Every city in the country is facing the same problem.
Right.
Chicago, there's a huge outspoken minority effort to stop this in Chicago, and the black mayor will hear nothing about it.
Well, but this is for me, this is the problem, and where Trump, in order to be truly effective, has got to work with local authorities, has got to work with the immigrant communities.
Well, that's going to be very hard because local authorities, including all these mayors and governors of blue states, have sworn to protect the illegals.
There's no way in which the federal government can actually go about this huge task without cooperation of local authorities.
I think that's true.
And to go after the gangs, which is the number one problem. You're going to need the intelligence on the ground that comes from people within the communities themselves. So I think Trump needs to start with a focus on the gangs and get our communities back. That's what the Latino voters who voted him in and the black voters wanted him to do.
Well, I think that's what Tom Homan, who he's made the border czar, has said he was going to do. That they would start out with Tren de Aragua and MS-13. And criminals, people who've racked up criminal records in the 2 years they've been here. So that makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
That's both the humane thing and the practical thing. Because if you start going after families, and we get all these images of families being ripped apart and kids being scared, it's going to spoil any opportunity to work with local authorities, and you need the cooperation of local police departments.
I agree that it looks bad. It looks awful. It's going to be painful to watch in some ways, but I think you've got to take out some of these families too. I think that the fact that you have a kid doesn't mean you're entitled to stay here just because you crossed a border.
The priority has to be the
priority is the gangs. The priority is the gangs, but families are not immune.
I'm just saying, from a political standpoint, as soon as you start going after families, you're not going to get.
No, it looks
even
bad.
Eric Adams is going to say, well, "I can't touch this," right? He's opened the door for cooperation with the Trump administration on the migrant issue. That's really where Trump
Eric
needs
Adams is very ambivalent. He wants to play both sides of this. On the one hand, he complains about the migrants costing New York way too much money and being unsustainable. And on the other hand, he swears up and down that he acknowledges that this is a sanctuary city. So I don't know what Eric Adams is going to decide to do.
I think if the focus is on gangs, the focus is on cleaning up Roosevelt Avenue, which is
the trafficking, Roosevelt Avenue,
prostitution. This is the community in Jackson Heights wants this crackdown on prostitution. They don't want to see it on their streets.
Yes.
If the federal government can assist in that, then I think that's a big win, and I think it's a win for everyone.
I agree.
The appointments? Did you have any thoughts on the cabinet picks?
I think most of them are solid. There are a couple that are a little dubious.
Which one?
I'm not such a fan of Tulsi Gabbard. I think that she's got a long record as somebody who sucks up to tyrants.
Tyrants? Lisa.
Putin.
Putin. I mean,
Assad.
It sounds like I'm talking to somebody on MSNBC about Trump. The Assad, that sounds like Hillary Clinton, when Hillary Clinton said.
Well, the funny thing about it is that, of course, it is a left-wing phenomenon, and she was a left-wing Democrat.
Well, she was a Democrat who was anti-war, and that's become now used to be. That's what the left used to always be about. That was the home that I lived in. But now, if you're anti-war, you're suddenly pro-Trump.
Well, being anti-war and going to check up on Bashar al-Assad to make sure that he didn't really gas his own people, which of course he did. Look, that's a little weird.
Getting into, did we need another war in Syria? We don't need another Middle Eastern war.
No, we don't need another Middle Eastern war. But the answer is not to go through the dictator who's gassing his own people.
Well, it's to understand the United States cannot be fighting wars all around the world to so-called liberate these countries, because it never works.
No, that was a bad idea.
And it winds up being a disaster, not only for Americans who have to fight in these wars, but for the people who live in these countries.
Right, it didn't work. I mean, we did that in a bunch of countries starting around the year 2001, and we failed.
And we failed.
Because democracy can't just be trucked into some random country that's never had a history of it.
It's certainly not at gunpoint. And I think a more realistic foreign policy is something that so many of the people who supported Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy Jr., who wound up voting for Trump, that's what they want. And I think Trump's got to stay in that line.
And I think lots of Republicans are there too, having gone through the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and watched them fail in real time. Although, I don't know, Iraq is only half a failure.
Again, it's we can't keep on fighting these wars.
Nobody's arguing to fight these wars, except
there are.
Joe Biden.
Lindsey Graham would always want to fight the next war.
That's true, but Joe Biden appears very, very hell-bent on making the Ukrainian war into World War III.
This is very scary, and this is kind of a typical Biden move, right? At first, he'll say, oh, no, we can't give them Abrams tanks. That's going to get us into World War III. And then he flip-flops on that. They suddenly have tanks. Then he said this about F-16s. We can't give them F-16s. That's going to be an escalation. Then he flips on that. And now he's giving them permission to use these long-range missiles on Russian territory.
4,000-pound missiles going into Russian territory. That is a sure way to provoke Putin to fire back harder and to up the ante. And upping the ante means nuclear weapons.
That's right. And, when you shoot a missile into an early detection warning system, which is what we're talking about. The Russians have it too. We have our early detection warning system, and they have it too. That can trigger something that could wind up just blowing up the entire world. And it feels like we have people, I think they're millennials who know nothing about history, running American foreign policy right now. Like, they have no idea the consequences for us Americans, and for what? Biden said it once again. This won't make a difference. The ability of the Ukrainians to fire these missiles will not change the dynamics of the war. This is a war of attrition and the Russians have 4 times the population of Ukraine.
And they don't care
winning.
about spending it. They don't care about the death rate among their people, the Russians.
Well, that's what happens in a war of attrition, and eventually you just wear your enemy down. And right now, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier is in the mid-40s.
No, it's crazy.
This is unsustainable.
It's crazy.
They can't continue to fight this war. And if they try to continue to fight this war, they're going to continue to lose more and more of their population, both fleeing and dead on the battlefield. Ukraine will never recover. For the good of the people of Ukraine, this war has to end.
No, and therefore we're all waiting for Trump to end it, to bring together these two parties and have peace talks.
But in the meantime, it does feel like Biden is sabotaging
It
this
does
by
feel like
escalating before January.
Right. And similarly, in Israel, taking away weapons from the Israelis that they need and have used pretty judiciously. He's doing the same thing there.
Biden's got no pull with Netanyahu. That is clear. Netanyahu has no respect for Biden. I think the only hope for any sort of settlement is honestly Trump at this point.
Right, and Hamas deciding to maybe return the hostages.
You know, my hope, my hope for the Trump presidency is that he operates from a place of love and not hate, and then he can kind of bring together the grand bargain, the art of the deal to the Middle East. If he could do that, my God,
well, he did
give
it
him
so well in his
the
first
Nobel
term.
Peace Prize.
I mean, the fact that he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords is actually shocking.
Yeah, well, I think we need to sort of now bring in the Iranians into this question. The Saudis have kind of left open the door a little bit with the Iranians.
You know what's a
That is
little
the one
interesting
way in
about
which
the
that-
Iranians? The fact that Trump is not signing on to regime change, which seems to me,
Yes.
that seems to me the only thing that will change Iran's bad behavior.
Well, but that would also put the kibosh on a possible deal. When Trump kind
There's
of
no deal.
backed
You
off-
can't make a deal with the Ayatollahs. It's been 40 years.
Well, like I'm saying, you know, we're not going to do a regime change. We're not going to get in another Middle Eastern war. Iran is a much more difficult enemy than Iraq was. So, you know.
But that's a very fragile regime. There is an entire country that wants it gone and doesn't have the arms to
Who's going
do
to
it.
invade to get rid of that government?
I don't think you have to invade. I think you have to arm the people who are already there. Arm the dissident ethnic groups.
We've been trying that for decades.
No,
It
we've
hasn't
never
worked.
really tried it.
We have been trying it, and it's failed every time. And the Bush administration tried to get us into another war, and with the neocon fantasy about overthrowing Iran after Iraq. It's done. We are done sending troops into the Middle East.
No troops, arms.
You can't do it without. Again, the fantasy that somehow the CIA is going to orchestrate an overthrow of this regime.
No, the
that's
CIA
been
does
around
not
for
appear to be on our side.
Yeah, well, you know, look, Trump opening up the door to possible negotiations with the Iranians. I say again, you know, one of the major support for Trump came from the anti-war movement. Sort of keep on working with them, and you know, maybe we'll end some of these wars under
Well,
Trump.
I mean, what Trump will do is return to sanctions, and he will cripple Iran, so Iran won't be in a position to subsidize the bad behavior of all its little terrorist proxies.
Yeah, sanctions don't really work.
They worked beautifully during
When
his
do they
first
work?
term.
When in the history of
his
sanctions
first-
has sanctions worked?
In his first term, they worked wonderfully.
They worked temporarily, but then after.
But then
a
when
little while,
Biden gave him billions of dollars, when gave Iran billions of dollars, they ceased working because they had the money to spend on Hamas and Hezbollah.
sanctions never work. Historically, they don't work. They last for about 6 months. Then whoever's under the sanctions figures out a way around it. The market, capitalist market, kind of fixes the whole thing. And
That's not what
everybody
happened
goes-
between 2016 and 2020. Iran was really crippled. We didn't hear from them.
Okay. Sanctions aren't going to work. They haven't worked. Iran needs to be dealt with as an adversary that can be worked with, because otherwise we're going to keep on having these blow-ups in the Middle East. There has to be some deal that can come out of this, and maintaining a good relationship with Saudi Arabia at the expense of Iran, that doesn't make sense for the United States' future foreign policy.
You know, Barack Obama tried very hard to actually have ongoing relations, diplomatic relations with Iran, treating them as a serious partner.
Yeah.
And it failed. It failed miserably.
They didn't build a nuclear bomb.
They started building a nuclear bomb. Now they've basically got one.
They don't have a nuclear bomb.
They have all but a nuclear bomb.
They had that before Obama took over. They've always had this kind of all but the pieces put together. And that's the problem, because you cannot fight a war against a regime that could put together a nuclear bomb at the drop of...
We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Please stay with us. Hi, and welcome back to the back room, where we talk about what's going on behind the scenes in politics across the country, across the city, across the Bronx. I'm Lisa Schiffren, a Republican speechwriter.
David Eisenbach, presidential historian. So what do you think about these the picks about the Defense Department?
Well, I think President Trump has a bias toward people who have a strong TV presence. I'm not sure I would have named Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, but he's got some important ideas that need to be enacted. I mean, he wrote a book on political correctness, on DEI and that sort of thing, which clearly has to be taken out of the war-fighting arena.
I get that. That would be a position for an undersecretary of defense, not a secretary of defense, right? Put him in charge of that particular little project within the Defense Department, not the entire $800 billion operation. Look, this is not a serious appointment, but it does show that Trump is going to get control over that Defense Department in a way that I don't know if any president has had that much control. Usually, the Secretary of Defense has his own power base that he can actually defy a president. This Secretary of Defense was going to go along with what Trump wants.
You know, it's always the undersecretary who actually runs the department.
Yeah, well, it depends on the president. Robert McNamara was one of those kind of monumental secretaries of defense that kind of
that was a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Even Dick Cheney, it was his undersecretary who ran the department. Cheney,
is that right?
Yes, had ideas about policy, in particular about the wars, but not running the department, which is in fact a huge bureaucratic task.
It's a huge bureaucratic task. What about Marco Rubio? State Department.
You know, Marco Rubio is very solid.
Yeah.
He's not my favorite, but he's really solid. He's a great anti-communist. He's anti-China. He's hardcore on all the places you need to be hardcore on.
He's a bit of a neocon, isn't he?
Yeah, I haven't fully renounced the neocon thing entirely. I think you need to understand, the problems with hostile, adversaries.
Yeah, but the problem is the neocons have no understanding about those hostile adversaries. They think they have their visions of what democracy and liberty look like, and then they were going to bring it to you at the point of the gun. So
I don't think Rubio will start a war. I think Rubio will be a tougher negotiator than he otherwise might be.
Yeah, well, I think he's going to be another one of these guys controlled by Trump. The interesting thing is now he opens up a Senate seat.
Right.
Which DeSantis can appoint. Do you have any thoughts on
Well, I keep hearing that
DeSantis?
he's going to, the person whose name gets bandied around a lot is Lara Trump, which she certainly did a good job politically. She kind of earned this. I don't know. I'd rather see DeSantis appoint himself.
Well, there's a way of doing it where he appoints kind of an elder statesman from the Florida State Senate, somebody who just wants to be senator for a couple of years and then is going to walk away when the election time comes and endorse DeSantis.
That'd be
the
fine.
back way of getting
DeSantis
that.
has 2 more years in office.
He's got 2 more years, and so does whoever's going to serve Rubio's term, and that would just be a graceful way of getting himself into the Senate.
That would be a graceful way. I hope he does that because
That's the smart way.
I'm not a big fan of nepotism.
Nepotism is no good. Plus, she becomes a threat to him, right? I mean, because now he's going to have to run against a Trump for Senate.
Right. No, he won't run against her. If she gets that seat, she's in it for 30 years.
Yeah. So he doesn't want that.
Right. No, he doesn't.
Not in his state.
He doesn't.
Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz. Oh my God! What left field did that come from? Running Medicaid and Medicare—that is the most serious bureaucratic task in the world, and a TV personality is not my idea of who ought to be doing that.
Yeah, no, that's a serious bureaucratic thing, and you really have to have somebody with experience, maybe running an HMO or one of these mega medical corporations that knows how to control spending and billing and knows all the tricks and that kind of thing. You need a really kind of a serious administrator for that position.
It does tell you, however, that Trump has some idea about reforming Medicaid and Medicare. It tells you that he's got some plan.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you would just bring up somebody from inside the department who's steeped in this.
Well, that is the reassuring thing. Usually, it would be some crony who worked for Big Pharma or one of these mega medical organizations who's.
Well, even last time Trump had somebody from Big Pharma. Alex Azar came out of Big Pharma, and he was a perfectly solid
this has
HHS
been
secretary.
sort of the kind of funny thing. I think
RFK Jr. is the more interesting question.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the big one. HHS. I think Trump has kind of learned some lessons from the past that this is going to be his administration. And he's not going to bring in these insiders who are just going to blow him off and run their own game.
Well, HHS is a huge, again, like DOD, HHS is a huge bureaucracy. It's huge. There are all of these subdivisions that, like the FDA and the NIH. But Trump clearly wants to change how we deal with pharma and the food industry.
Absolutely.
And that is interesting. I have a kid who made me stop eating seed oils. And, I kind of buy that they're not good for you, so I'm willing to give them up.
Sure, and then there's much worse than that that's going into, Fruit Loops and our cereals and our processed foods that are giving us all these cancers. There's no question about it.
We have real problems in healthcare in this country. People are sicker than they need to be.
Yes.
And that is about food and medicine.
And that definitely, and it starts with food, and it starts at young ages. And so if we can sort of correct these problems, it's going to save us a lot of money and lives in the long run.
It's an interesting thing for Trump to take on because those are big Republican backers.
Yes.
Pharma and the food industry back Republicans.
Of course, they also back Democrats who
when
sell
it's
out.
Convenient.
Too. But I think, look, when you're going to be a one-term president, then you can get things done. And I think that's where I put my hope that he'll resist Big Pharma and these big food, agriculture corporations to actually do something right for American health and make America healthy again.
I think there will be some responsibility for a lot of the COVID stuff. I think that's going to get brought up, and I think RFK will actually do a good job on that.
I think you're right.
I think the vaccines were problematic. The protocols by which people were forced to take them were problematic. I think there's going to be what would you say? Just people will pay for their mistakes.
Yeah, and even if it's just a matter of getting at the truth. Look, we've all heard all sorts of theories and about where the virus came from and that kind of thing. Get us the truth, and then we'll figure out, who needs to be punished for what. Look, I'm agnostic as right now, but I just want the truth, and I know that our government has not been telling us the truth about a lot of things for a very long time.
Right. You've heard Trump stop bragging about getting the vaccine out so quickly.
Yes, he did.
He was very proud of that.
Operation Warp Speed doesn't talk about that.
That didn't come up this whole campaign.
Yeah. You know what else I'm excited to get the truth about? UFOs. I think Trump's going to finally get us the truth on UFOs. What are your thoughts on the UFOs?
I mean, from what I keep hearing, it sounds like they exist.
Yeah, it sounds like they exist. I can't believe it myself. It sounds like our government has these programs that have crash retrieval programs, that have biological
Well, it sounds like people
samples.
see them on a regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Navy pilots.
Navy pilots. And we've got all these videos, videos that the Defense Department won't show us with clarity about these phenomenon, these vehicles. And I think that the American public can handle it. We can understand that we're not alone in the universe. And
I'm
that
less
doesn't
sure that
mean
we'll
the
be able to
entire
handle.
civilization is going to collapse.
I'm less sure that we'll be able to handle the truth about who killed JFK.
That's another thing I want to know.
Right, and I think we will find out this time.
Hey, look, Trump promised us UFOs, JFK, and Jeffrey Epstein. He promised to release the truth on all those things.
I don't think we're going to get the truth on Jeffrey Epstein. Too many people who are powerful.
Still powerful.
Right.
Right. You can throw those old guys from the CIA under the bus, but not the Jeffrey Epstein lot.
Right. Anyway, thank you for watching tonight, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of The Back Room.